Welcome to the Endpoints podcast, presented by the ALS Therapy Development Institute. I'm Jonathan Gang. In 1999, Stephen Heywood, who was 29 years old at the time, was diagnosed with ALS. His family was devastated when they learned that there were no treatments that could slow or stop his disease. His brother Jamie decided that he had to do something about it, founding the organization that would eventually become ALS TDI, the world's first nonprofit biotech, in the basement of his parents' Newton, Massachusetts home. The first hire Jamie made as he worked to get this new organization off the ground was Rob Bonazoli. In those days, Rob was responsible for, in his words, everything non-scientific. Part of this included building the team that would carry out Jamie's lofty research goals. Many of the people he helped recruit at the time are still with the organization 25 years later. Two of those early employees were Ken Thompson, now ALS TDI's Vice President of Facility Operations, and Fernando Vieira, our CEO and Chief Scientific Officer. Today, on Endpoints, we're joined by Rob, as well as Ken and Fernando, to talk about what it's been like to see ALS TDI grow from its humble beginnings in a basement to one of the world's leading ALS research institutions. We'll start with Rob, who takes us back to the very start, getting the new organization off the ground in the Newton home of John and Peggy Heywood, Stephen and Jamie's parents.
When Jamie asked if I'd try to do this with him, I was 28, I think, and had a bunch of nonprofit experience, but obviously had never done anything of this, what became this scale. And I just couldn't come up with any kind of convincing moral reason not to. Stephen was a dear friend of mine, and I remember having this analogy, which probably sounds a little bit dramatic now, but I thought, well, if I was walking by Stephen or anybody and they were, I don't know, I can't remember what the analogy I had was, drowning in a pond, I would never hesitate to jump in. And I just thought, this is just that, it's just slower. And so I said, okay, let's just jump in, do what we can. One of our first formal meetings when we decided to do it, it was me and him and John. I don't remember if Peggy was at the table. She was in the kitchen of their place. And we were trying to come up with what we'd name it. So it was from that. And I remember, actually, I can tell you, the original name of the organization, of course, was ALS TDF, Therapy Development Foundation. And here's a secret about why we chose to name it that. Because we didn't have any money. We didn't have anything. And we said, if we name it a foundation, when we call people, they'll think we have money and they'll call us back. So that's why we named it that, because we were like, why would anyone, talk to us? That was why we initially named it that. And so, my role and responsibility in terms of just, at first, again, we were just doing everything we could together. It was just, us in the basement. And then in Jamie's house when he moved around the corner. And, but basically I was responsible for everything kind of non-scientific in terms of the building of the organization and structures for fundraising and for interacting with patients and building a staff and a culture and, just kind of everything. I mean, we all did everything. There was only, there was a couple of us and then three of us and then five of us. And then, that's just kind of how it went.
What Jamie and Rob were trying to build was unprecedented, and they knew they would need to find uniquely dedicated and passionate people who would be willing to take a chance on their vision.
We actually put newspaper ads for entry-level superheroes. And that was how it was written. It was an entry-level superhero. And man, you should have seen the resumes we got. People just resonated with it. And we were, really saying, we're trying to do something probably impossible. Come try to do it with us. And so we got some really, really, really incredibly energized, passionate, mostly young, not exclusively, but mostly young folks, dive in with us. And again, we were all, it's the old cliche of, building the car while you're driving down the hill or flying across the country. And, it really felt like that. And there was a incredible energy because of that.
One of the first to come aboard was Ken Thompson, who also had a deep connection to ALS and the Heywood family. He was Stephen's best friend.
I joined because am a friend of Stephen Heywood, who was diagnosed with ALS at the age of 29. And his family, in response to his diagnosis, started ALS Therapy Development Foundation, and they needed people. That year, 1999, was a year after I was married, and Stephen was at my wedding with another good friend of ours, Allison. And he had I don't think he was diagnosed at that point, but he was definitely experiencing some symptoms in his hands, and he was in the process of being diagnosed. So yeah, it was, for me, joining ALS TDI was, not a question of, is this the right job for me, or is this good for my career? At the time, I was working at the Bay campus in Narragansett, Rhode Island, for the University of Rhode Island, and I had dreams of becoming a marine biologist. But this was much more important, and I was honored to be signed on as a formulation scientist underneath one of our PhDs at the time, Gianti Ramasubu. And that's how it all started.
Fernando Vieira, who would go on to lead the organization many years later, was also one of these early hires.
I was 21, had just completed a degree in biological engineering from the University of Florida, and came up to the Boston area and wanted to work in a research lab. Looked at a lot of different labs and had a few different opportunities come up. But most of them really only gave me the opportunity to be a pair of hands. And then I came across and interviewed with, back when, monster.com was a thing. I put my resume there, and this place, ALS Therapy Development Foundation, reached out, ALS TDF, and it was alphabet soup. But I went to the website and I was like, well, that's interesting, right? This is a new lab that's starting up, and it's trying to have an impact on ALS right away. And there was this incredible story, multiple stories really, of people affected by the disease, families affected by the disease, who had banded together to do this thing. And when I got to interview with those people, I felt like they didn't just want a pair of hands. They certainly wanted a pair of hands, but they also would welcome ideas and thoughts and contributions and different ways to be part of the fight. And that was exciting to me. And so I joined that very motley crew.
Rob says that beyond building a team to execute their mission, it was also important to foster a culture that would reflect the values that the organization was founded on, especially a connection to the ALS community.
One of the things that was a real value that we had, maybe not from day one, but day two, was that we knew it was critical to have ALS patients in and around the office and then the lab, and both all the time. We knew that was critical. We knew we wanted all of our staff to know personally and be interacting with ALS patients and their families all the time. And we built that in very, very deliberately and from the earliest days. And along with that, it was really important for us to allow and even encourage people to feel and express emotion. I mean, they were some of their people who became very friendly with, and who dove in with us as patient volunteers to help do fundraising events or whatever. They would die. And so to kind of have that built into the culture, that that we were, this is what we were doing, and that we weren't gonna kind of hide from that, and that we were going to allow the emotion around that because these were real relationships with people that we loved was a huge part of it. So it was a very intimate, very energized, very creative early environment in those first few years. And it once it started to grow, it grew fast. But there was a while, I guess the first, I don't even know, whatever, year or two, where it was a few of us in a way kind of pretending there was a lot more behind us than there was, so it was exciting. It was beautiful, and it hanging around with Stephen all the time. We used to do this thing in our first office. Stephen and Jamie and Ken and there's a couple other guys. After work, we'd get together. We'd all sit in different rooms in the office and like play video games against each other. It was just, we just kind of goof around, and then next morning we just get back to it. We get back to work. It was a sweet time in a certain way. A lot of energy, a lot of fatigue, not a lot of sleep, but beautiful.
Throughout this time, the team was figuring out everything as it went along. No small task at any company, but a particular challenge when your mission is to treat an extremely complex, poorly understood disease.
When I was hired on to the Institute, we were in 2 small rooms in the New England Medical Center, which is now called the Tufts Medical Center, I believe, right outside of Chinatown in Boston. And I kid you not, these rooms were on a half floor in between 2 floors, just in the depths of this complex known as the New England Medical Center at that time. And that space, obviously was not big enough to kind of get to the heart of what we were trying to answer, get to the solutions we wanted to find. So we needed to find bigger space. And we were just starting out, and, funds were not available. So we worked with what we had, but we eventually moved out of that space in the back of my Volkswagen Jetta station wagon. It took 2 trips to move out of that space in my station wagon, and we moved over to the Mass College of Pharmacy that had kind of real resources for doing animal research, and allowed us to expand into the SOD1 mouse model and really kind of start to grow our research program, specifically our pharmacology program. We were trying to get to an answer or a treatment as quickly as possible. And in order to do that, and which is still the case today, you can't just take a non-FDA approved compound and put it into humans. You need to first take it through an animal model, excuse me. And then if it's a novel compound, it then needs to go into a primate model before it can go into humans. So in the beginning, we knew that we needed an animal model to start with in order to get to humans. And at the time, and which is still the case, the SOD1 G93A mouse model is the standard for researching ALS.
Despite being a small, relatively young team, Ken, Fernando, and their colleagues would go on to help develop protocols for testing drugs in animal models of ALS that remain the gold standard for the industry today.
This was actually right after I finished medical school. When I threw myself back in full time here at ALS TDI, I took over the in vivo pharmacology team. And a lot of the team members who I got to lead then are still with us today. Ken Thompson, though Ken's role has grown a lot as well. Andy Moreno, Josh Kidd, Matt Farola, Carlos Maya, all those guys were part of the in vivo pharmacology team. And what was fantastic about our efforts at that time was our intense focus on getting to the truth of the matter, right? Not letting yourself be fooled. So a lot of folks had been testing drugs in a leading model of ALS, a SOD1 mouse, through the years. And sometimes results would get published that nobody could quite replicate. So we worked really, really hard to figure out what criteria were really important to control in order to not fool yourself, into thinking that something works or not fool yourself into thinking that something doesn't. And the thing about that team we still have is this core of just integrity, and not getting hung up on what you hope to see or what you expect to see, but just recording what you see. And so that was critically important. And I think it's still core to the DNA of all of our research program today, all these years later.
25 years later, ALS TDI is one of the most respected, most comprehensive institutions in ALS research, coming a long, long way from those early days of guerrilla science and doing more with less.
I could not have imagined at that time where we would go, how we would be perceived, the publications we would come out with. I wasn't necessarily thinking about our future. It was more the day to day, but I'm just so impressed with our team and what we have accomplished and what we continue to accomplish. And as I've said, I think we have finally gained respect from the outside community and from other ALS researchers, and they kind of see us as a real invested partner in the battle for this disease. So yeah, I could have never imagined that we would come this far. I mean, we are still a small organization, but we are within the ALS research field. I think we are a very significant organization.
Ken, Fernando, and many others are still here after decades in the fight. While the mission to end ALS was personal for some from the start, for others, like Fernando, it's become much more so through the years.
I've chosen to stay for a whole host of reasons, but the biggest one does tie to a really incredibly close friendship that I forged early on at ALS TDI with a guy named Sean Scott. Sean was at ALS TDI, or it was TDF at the time. I think when I started, he was as a volunteer, because his mom had ALS. It was in his family. His mom was living with SOD1 ALS. His grandmother had died from SOD1 ALS, and he quit a career as a television producer to work on the ALS problem and try to solve it for his mom in real time. And he and I just got along, and we became best friends. We became roommates. And when I first met him, I didn't know that he was at risk of carrying the gene. I didn't know it was familial when I first met him. But, as we got closer and I learned the family story, put two and two together, realized that we were probably also, or there was a 50% chance that we were working to save him too. Sadly, he did end up developing ALS a few years later, in late 2007, early 2008, and passed away rapidly after a rapid disease progression. And so for me, seeing that and having somebody that I'd grown to know and love, watching how it affected his family, how it affected him, I couldn't imagine letting that exist, right? Allowing that to still be. And so I threw myself full time into and dedicated my entire career to trying to address that need here at ALS TDI, where we're working literally to invent new medicines every day. Now, through the years, I've gotten to know lots of people and gotten to love and lose lots of people with ALS. Um, so it's a labor of love. It's also um, there's a sense that this is hard on a lot of different levels, right? It's an incredibly hard scientific challenge that will take a lot of effort from a lot of people to solve. It's also emotionally really, really hard. And I've seen a lot of people contribute lots of years of their life to it and then walk away because it got emotionally hard. And if everybody does that when it gets emotionally hard, this won't get done. And so that's another piece of it, is like sticking to it, sticking with this until we solve it. Because if we don't, I'm not sure anybody can or will. So we got to see it through.
Ken says, even as ALS TDI has grown and changed throughout the years, one thing that's stayed the same is the centrality of people living with ALS to the organization's culture.
I think a lot of the people that are still here today are kind of from the original startup team, and they still, not that our newer employees don't know this, but kind of our original employees remember the struggle. They remember the passion that was where we sprouted from, and that memory has kept them going. And I know that our new employees get to experience this at our events as well when they meet patients for the first time and patients' family for the first times. I think that kind of gives them what we early on called religion. It gives them the fight, the passion that they want to keep moving forward and want to stay invested in ALS TDI.
Rob, who's now been away from the organization for many years, says that it continues to amaze him what the people he once hired have accomplished, and that they've maintained the same commitment to seeing the original mission of ending ALS through.
I mean, it's amazing in a lot of ways, you know, and for me, the most important or the most touching things, just in terms of my perspective of being there and being with the other people who dove into it, are really Ken and Fernando. You know, they weren't there from day one, but they were there from day 3. You know, and you know, Ken, for me, it's always been the spiritual heart of the place. As soon as he came in, a quiet man, but with just full of love and full of commitment and dedication. He and Stephen couldn't have loved each other more. And the fact that his adult professional life turned into this, you know, after he came to join, I just think is one of the purest expressions of it. And Fernando, you know, coming in as a young man and now really making this his life work. I mean, seeing that and being with them, kind of being part of hiring them, you know, and just come on, join, let's see what we can do. That is incredible. There's also, of course, some real sadness, right? We weren't naive by any stretch of the imagination, but we were kind of, it was important for us to be deliberately unrealistic. You know? And it was important that everybody on the team, from anybody from someone processing gift receipts to somebody doing lab work, that they could directly, and they could articulate it, they could directly tie what they were doing in their daily job to trying to cure ALS and save patients with ALS. And that they couldn't articulate it, then they're probably doing the wrong thing. We had to think about it. We wanted that to be front and center. And the mission, we knew we needed to take on a mission that had was most likely to fail. Because if we moved the bar of the mission to something that was more likely to succeed, we actually weren't doing what we came there to do. So we were there to get treatments to ALS patients, help save the lives of patients who had the disease right then that day. And so in a way, it's beautiful to see how far the organization has come. It's beautiful to see it flourish and develop and become more sophisticated and all that. And it's incredibly sad, right, to think about, all the people that I knew in those early days that are no longer alive, and all the people all through the life of the organization who have partnered with the organization, had part of their lives, and patients who haven't, who are no longer alive. So in some ways, it's really beautiful to have been a part of building something that has flourished and is still working to save ALS patients' lives. And it's also a sad reminder that, we didn't do what we came there to do, at least not yet.
Fernando says that the past 25 years have had many difficult moments, but looking to the future, he's never had more hope that we are moving closer and closer to accomplishing our mission of ending ALS.
It's frustrating that I've lived through many generations now of people with ALS, and it's devastating to confront the losses. That's hard. It's frustrating to not know enough yet. But it's also, that also gives me a lot of hope, right? That we're learning so much more quickly now than we ever could before, both because of technologies that are available now that did not exist 25 years ago, and also because of the capabilities that we've built as a team and as a field as a whole. The ALS field has come so far, and there are so many groups working in the space, and we're not in this alone. We really are all working together. This is legitimately the most hopeful moment yet. Each day is a more hopeful moment in ALS because we know more, and there are more people working on it with us to try to address this need. So I'm excited to see where we go next.
There are currently no treatments to stop or reverse ALS, but the ALS Therapy Development Institute is working to change that. To learn more about ALS TDI and our research to end ALS, visit als.net. Thanks for listening.